Hi,
Hi.
everyone. Welcome back to
Hi.
another episode of Bitch Up.
Welcome back, bitches.
Welcome back. Hola,
Thanks for
hola,
coming
hola.
back.
They're like, we were forced to be here. Just kidding.
Right?
You
Whatever.
just
You
show
like
up on
it
my
here.
feed. Yeah,
Les gusta la mala vida.
for real. You don't lie. You like it. Anyways. How are we doing? How's everybody doing today?
Well, it's still Leo season. So
Yeah.
Leo girls are up and we're enjoying our birthday season.
Yeah, you're officially 33. And then while this episode is out, you're going to be on vacation, which is
Yes.
fun. So, where are you going? Tell us. Where are you leaving us?
I'm going to
Where are
be
you
off
going
the
and you're
grid.
leaving us at?
That's my
You're like, bitch, I'm
business.
not telling you.
Yeah, that's my business. I'm going to be off
She's
the
like, I
grid.
don't need you guys to stalk me. I just want to know so I can.
all
I'm
you
like,
need to
me and
know.
Joey are going to be with our little binoculars, just like, there she is.
All you need to know is that I will be by a large body of water, sipping on margaritas and having good food. That's all you need to know. But
Well,
yeah.
that's good. You're like getting my tan on. Yeah.
That part, yes. Actually I need to figure out my tanning situation before I get there too. I want to be there. I want to get there and be already tan and then just like, elevate a couple shades by the time I leave there. It's my summer tune-up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, do we have any fun bitch up moments this week or any fun bitch up recommendations?
Okay, I have a recommendation since we're talking about birthdays. If your birthday's coming up or if it is your birthday, I recommend for people to do their birthday freebies. Sign up to all the rewards that you can ahead of time so that you can reap the benefits. I've been doing that today. I picked up my free slice of cake at Susie's Cupcakes. And it was
Ooh.
amazing.
Wait, I've heard about Susie's cakes or whatever's for a while, and I keep hearing that they're so good. Like, do you recommend that place or?
Yeah, bitch, you ate cupcakes from there last week.
I thought that was bunt cake.
No, it's Susie's cakes.
Why did I think you
They're
said bunt?
cupcakes. No, they're cupcakes. I gave you cupcakes. I didn't give you a buntini.
I don't know. No, I know. I don't know why in the text I read bunt, like bunt cupcakes or something. I'm like, oh, you're right. Oh my God, that's crazy.
You're the one that suggested the buntinis. You're like, oh, a little bunt moment or something like that.
Oh yeah, I did. But it was me.
So I think actually need to go get I need to get my free buntini from them too, actually. So thank you for reminding me. But yeah, today I went out to lunch with my sister and my comadre. We went out to Blaze Pizza, had some pizza, and then that same shopping center where we were at has the Susie's cupcakes. So I was like, oh, let me go get my free slice. And I was like, do you guys want dessert? And so went and got my, it's a big slice, by the way, not because it's free that they like jip you out. No, it's like decent size of cake. And then I got, what did I get? Oh, I got the chocolate vanilla marble with like chocolate and vanilla frosting, excuse me. So good. It tasted like ice cream. It was so good. Yeah. So definitely recommend you guys to do that. Or if not, at the very least, like you suggested, go to Susie's Cupcakes. They have really good cupcakes.
Yeah. That's cool. Go get your freebies. I'm sure you have so many still to do, right?
Yeah, and I was just thinking about it like literally yesterday. I was like, I need to really get my freebies because I'm gonna be gone at the end of the week. So I really just have a short window. I really have a short window for that. Yeah. I'm gonna go pick up my birthday freebie hopefully tomorrow when I go get some shopping done because I also redeemed some rewards on my credit card and I just used it all towards a Sephora gift card. So I was like, let me re-up on the shit that I'm gonna need for this trip.
Yeah.
And so hopefully I'll get that this weekend. But yeah, that's cool. My recommendation, guys.
Love it. Love it. Heard it here first, folks. My bitch up moment is work related. So your bitch has been going through it, okay? She has been going through it. It's been a busy ass last like 2 weeks. I am 2 people down, 2 women down really. And I am feeling it. So I've had to bring in reinforcements from like different teams. And obviously it's not, I wouldn't say it's intimidating, but it's also like a little interesting because everybody has a different way of like,
doing
how they do things and whatnot. And then especially because they work with PMs that have been there for a while and like really know their shit. So it was a little bit of imposter syndrome at the same time, because
Okay.
obviously the people that they lent over were like, oh, yes, I have all the time in the world to really help, but also I'm looking forward to learning new things. And I'm like, I don't know if there's really much that I can teach you because I feel like I'm still
I'm
learning a
new.
lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, not
Yeah.
new, but like
New,
you
but
are new
still,
to this
yeah.
space. Yeah.
Yeah. But this week, I've been able to align with the people that were so gracious enough to help my team and cover for the teammates that I lost because they're on vacation and maternity, doing great things. But we've been working very well together. And I actually did end up teaching her a lot of stuff that she didn't know
Oh, that's
when
good.
it came to reporting, because apparently she didn't have, I guess, a lot of access to that, or it wasn't stuff that she was doing. So
Okay.
um, I actually got to do something and show her something that was new with like formulas and stuff. Cause we're pros. We're pros at our report making. Okay. We know
Hell
a lot
yeah.
of shit when it comes to Excel. So I was actually like, oh, wait, I actually did teach someone something and it benefited them. And they were super excited about it. So I was like, that was my bitch up moment. I was a mentor.
Aw. That's good. I feel like teaching and learning new skills on the job is always good and exciting. And I think you talking about your imposter syndrome, there was nothing for you to sweat because you know your shit. Like,
Yeah. But
you
I
didn't
think it's
come
that.
this far to
But
just get
again,
this far.
it's me second guessing how much do I really know? And then
Right.
also my PC that is new, she's also still learning. And obviously, she has a lot of questions. And usually, because I'm really busy, my APM or my other PC will like jump in to help. But because they're both gone, and then the other PM is obviously busy too, she's been coming directly to me because obviously she hasn't really built rapport with her to the point where she feels comfortable enough to go ask her questions, which I still
Okay.
encourage, obviously. But she was just very much like, oh, I really enjoy the way you train. I actually feel like I understand more with you than I have been with the other
Other
people, even though
people.
they're like great trainers and I've been present during their training
Mhm.
presentations. So I'm like, oh, they're great. But obviously, everybody,
It's
is
different.
it's different. So I'm like, oh, great. Okay, I'm making a difference here. I know what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
know my shit. I brought some knowledge to people. So that was my bitch up moment this week.
Well, that's good because I know you've been saying you've been so stressed and overwhelmed with just all the chaos that has unfolded ever since you've been down all these people. So one, I think
Yeah.
it's great that they're lending you new team members to help offset some of that. Because I mean, I can't imagine you having to then step in and pick up some of that work. Like that is not ideal or realistic. And then it just reminds me of how once upon a time you trained me when I first joined
Oh, I
at
was like, what did I do? I was scared. I was like, wait, what did I do?
okay, like why do you think the worst of yourself?
No, it's because the way
What
you
did you
said
think I
it's
was
like,
gonna
this
tell
reminds me
you?
of once upon a time. It came off like, oh, I'm
Okay,
about to like blow your shit up.
why
And I'm like,
no, why do you think I would do that?
you're right. You're right. You're
We
right.
need to unpack that.
You're
We need to
right.
unpack that.
You're right. Don't point at me. Just kidding.
Well, this is why I pointed because you're notorious for doing that. Anyway,
I know. I
no,
know.
I was saying like that just like reminded me of once upon a time when I first joined. When I first met you, you were my trainer. You trained me, and I learned so
Mhm.
much from you. So like, I can totally see that, girl, in terms of like you teaching. Like you and Bree both trained
Yeah.
me. I
Yeah.
remember, and you both had different approaches, but you guys are both so patient, and I felt really comfortable following up and asking you guys questions. And then you sat next to me, so it was easy for me to be like, "Hey,"
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and
Hey there.
the rest is history.
And now we're here
But
in podcast.
congratulations. I mean, that's good, friend. I think kudos to
Thanks.
you. And I feel like it's one of those things where it's a nice reward to have in the midst of the stress of work and things and being like, fuck this job. But then also being grateful for being in the space that you're in and to be
Yeah.
able to share that knowledge. And I think in general, I think we work corporate and I think that I always see all these like shitty stories or people talking about
Mhm.
their experiences with their managers and their colleagues. And I think that when you have those moments, it's really nice to kind of just be like, wow, like I feel so grateful and fortunate that like I'm either in a space that's safe for me and I'm helping create a safe space for others too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I've been getting a lot of feedback from my PC, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm glad that you feel that way, that you feel comfortable enough and happy enough where it's, yeah, I feel like there's always like a lot of micromanaging and all that stuff. And she's like, I feel like you really allow me to dive in and do things, but also very open door policy. Like if there's something I'm not comfortable with or comfortable doing, you'll hold my hand and guide me, or you're very patient, which I will admit sometimes I'm very impatient because I'm like, I have to figure out a way to describe what you're doing in different ways so they understand it. Cause sometimes, it's not
It's just
clicking.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, how can
You
I
have to get
approach this
creative.
so they get
Yeah.
it? Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, yeah, I've been tested, but I'm happy
But
because
you're
one of my
better for
besties
it.
is coming back next week. And we'll be
Nice.
back. We'll be a man up.
Some normalcy. Some
Yeah.
normalcy will come back.
I was like, no. But yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my bitch up moment, is that I've
Just hang
had to
on.
really, really, really step into my leadership position and really, 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 and just learn that I'm doing great, basically.
Yeah.
You're
Receive your
doing amazing,
flowers.
sweetie. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right.
Well, anyways, just kidding. So today's topic, again, diving back into the anthropology of it all, right? Is it?
Yeah.
You know us. We're studious girlies. We just love to dive in
We
and
just want to go
research.
back to school, you guys. It's really
Honestly,
all.
at this point, we probably should.
No, as I was doing some research for this, I was just sitting down and reading these articles, and then I was even reading snippets of books, and I was just like, I miss this. This is so
Yeah,
fun to do. Like, especially
literally.
especially when you're doing it as in like right now, right? Because it's something we're intrigued of, we're interested in, so we're like going out of our way to put in the work to like look into it.
Mhm.
And without having the pressures of like, oh, I have to like pass this motherfucking class. Like it's so enjoyable to just learn in that
You know
way,
what?
you know?
I've been thinking about that too, because I feel sometimes that's why people kind of encourage people to like put off school and maybe live life a little bit, because
Hmm.
when you're in constant, like, again, school is such a like I guess some people don't enjoy school so much because it's something that's expected of you to do well in,
Yeah.
and
And
then
it's sort of, you feel like it's like socially imposed on you. And then it's
yeah,
also so structured. And sometimes it's just like, it's very rigid, if you
yeah.
will.
But then
Yeah.
when you've been away from it so many years, you again start to appreciate. You're like, oh, I learned so much. I actually, this isn't as hard as it seemed when I was in college. Like, I get it now. So maybe going back to school, I've thought about it. I'm like, oh, I probably would very much. I mean, I've always enjoyed learning, but I'm like, I would definitely be like, oh my God, I'm back
Like
in learning.
I guess I
Yeah.
wouldn't take it for granted as
Yeah.
much.
Or I
And
wouldn't be like, oh, this is such like a bitch, like test taking and stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I'm like, oh, I can understand it now. I have the tools now to really understand what's going on here and not
on
like
the
freak
perspective.
out. Yeah, in this perspective, exactly. And just more life experience too, that kind of puts you in that mentality of like, again, a little bit more nuance and understanding both sides of situations, which I think this topic again opened the doors for us.
Yeah.
So with that said,
I just thought of something. I was like,
what?
new segment idea, Bishop University. Come learn and teach us with that. I'm just kidding.
Everybody's gonna be like logging off, logging off.
They're like, they don't even have teaching credentials. I'm just kidding.
We just have a master's, not a master's, manifesting.
Right? Yeah.
Me.
And on that front, we're gonna take a 2-year hiatus to go to school to
No,
get our
I think we would
master's.
still do our podcast and
I
do our
know, it's a
masters.
joke.
Like, we would push ourselves. It's a lot of commitment. And yeah,
Yeah.
but
Anyway.
anyways. So I guess the topic is, and it's come up, I've seen it come up a lot in social media, and
Mhm.
it's been something that we've discussed too, personally and privately. And I think it's a lot to do. Well, I guess currently we're in a time where there seems to be a rise in media literacy. And I was honestly in denial of this. But the more I come across people's opinions or, takes on books, movies, and all the media and whatnot, I think the sadder I get, because then it's like a realization that, oh, wait, maybe they're onto something. Maybe people are becoming a little bit more illiterate as time passes because obviously, with everything that's going on. But I think I've noticed there being an uproar when it comes to watching shows or any form of media or just
Mm-hmm.
reading anything because of the topics that that media is based on. So, I guess my understanding from what I've seen is that some people believe that if certain topics are discussed or shown in media, that that means that whoever created that form of media supports and believes in that topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if a character is racist in a movie, then the audience will then,
Run with
I guess,
that.
run with that or what is it? Or basically believe that the person who directed the movie or created the script for the movie is endorsing racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously, people are going to express their opinions. They're going to have their own opinions, especially in today's society. And
Mm-hmm.
then I guess obviously it's based on like your personal moral bias. I think that that's something that I've seen a lot more recently, especially with conversations that I've had with people and how much influence, yeah, how much influence their moral code
Yeah.
impacts the way they see things
Yeah.
or even the way they create art. Even people who create art, right? It all tends to have some type of bias because of
Yeah.
personal experiences or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, this is why we figured that this would be a fun topic to discuss because you know, we've always pushed or kind of been outspoken of how two things can be true, where
True.
media can depict a theme for the sake of depicting, or because they are endorsing or even romanticizing it, right? Because we can't deny that there are some forms of media that do that. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess the first thing that I think that we would probably do, and obviously something important that we always try to set as a premise is providing the definition of words that we're going to be using in today's analytical
Yeah.
discussion, right? So obviously, again, we're discussing about the depiction of, or I guess depiction versus endorsement or romanticization. So according to the Merriam-Webster, depiction is a representation in words or images of someone or something. So when we're putting it in the context of media, it would be showing an action, an event, or if it's like a dark choice, some people like to go dark. It would be like showing an action of a crime or abuse in the story as it is, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's basically giving the reality of what it is if something's violent or whatnot. And then we have endorsement. So, endorsement, according to Cambridge, is the act of saying that you approve or support something or
Mm-hmm.
someone. So, again,
Right.
when a story or creator tells the audience that a depicted action or behavior is good or right, right? Based off whatever moral background or whatever they have. And then we have romanticization. I feel like I've been having such a hard time with that word recently.
Yeah.
Um, so according to Cambridge, romanticization is to talk about something in a way that makes it sound better than it actually is, or to make someone believe that something is better than it really is. So again, sometimes we see that they make harmful or dark behavior look stylish, aesthetically pleasing, attractive, or
Or cool.
desirable,
Yeah. Just,
yeah,
yeah.
emotionally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way we should probably break this down is having like a generalized idea of how media is portrayed and consumed, right? What are some factors that we look or should be looking into when we're analyzing a form of media to determine whether or not it's problematic? I think that it's important
Mm-hmm.
to kind of set that basis so that when we are, if we bring examples, we can kind of get an idea of like, or at least look into those factors like little check boxes of what would make a form of media depicted, or is it endorsing or romanticizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think as far as like how to determine if a form of media is actually good has a lot to do with the way that the story is told.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously this is something that we learn in literature when we're or at least I recall it, especially in like in English classes. You are always, told to kind of find what the theme of the book is or the theme of the movie, right? So I
What is
think
the
when it
author saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
what are they trying to say? So obviously I feel that a good form of media would have a very clear message, dependent on the themes that they're exploring, and they have complex characters. So that means that they have an authentic depiction of the human experience, right? You
Yeah.
can't have a flat character because it's not real. It's
Yeah.
not
People are
something that,
not one dimensional. Yeah.
yeah, and it's not something that the audience can relate to anyways, because like you said, we're not one dimensional. I think that well, I guess when analyzing literature specifically, one of the things that we've learned in our schooling is to determine whether something is explicitly being said or
Mm-hmm.
something is implicitly being said, right?
Right.
So the difference of that would be if an author is literally telling you what it's about, or it's inferring, right?
Mm-hmm.
And usually you can see that when you read like what is it, the prologue, or like
Prologue.
the forward, right? Like they would literally tell you, this is what it's about, this is how I got here, this is why I wrote this book, and then you get into the book. Or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they will go ahead and just infer. Again, you infer what they're trying to say through the themes, through the characters, and obviously the tone of the story. What
Mm-hmm.
vibes is this story giving, right?
Right.
One thing that I think, especially now in today's society, that I feel is now important to really look into is like the history of the creator as well.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
like their
Mm-hmm.
cultural backgrounds. What do we know about like their personal life?
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously also comparing their works, right? Because sometimes there are authors or creators that have very similar work and have a similar message throughout all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's a little hard for them to deny, if they are problematic, that that's not what they were trying to portray.
If
If
it's a
all of their
pattern.
work, yeah, if there's a pattern there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, again, analyzing any media that they have, I guess reviewing like the language, the plot development, and the point of view. I think that's super important.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, because you're also looking at how their themes or their intentions are being executed throughout the book. And that, like you said, that's where you look at the plot
mhm.
development, the character development, and all the fun literary, what is it? Literary
Devices?
devices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, let me get back into my English. And obviously we're given those tools to be able to dissect the art that we're given.
Yeah.
So I guess that also kind of brings us into what's the role that we play as the audience, right? I
Right.
think, to put it simply, and as we've mentioned, our job as an audience is to kind of figure out what the author is trying to convey,
Mm-hmm.
which I think it is where the issue kind of arises, especially with the idea that we as a society are becoming, again, media literate, right? I think one thing that,
Wait, media illiterate or media
yeah,
literate? Okay.
illiterate, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I did want to say one thing that I always keep in mind and I always remember, especially when it comes to literature, is that I remember my IB teacher said that there can be multiple interpretations when it comes
Yeah.
to a piece of literature, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're writing an essay. You're told that you have to write your thesis, I believe this because blah, blah, blah. And then you have to use the literature piece to basically prove the point that you're trying to say, right? Of course,
Yeah. Support
sometimes,
it.
and I've done this before, there's been where you're kind of reaching a little bit, but as long as you have good supporting pieces of text that actually fit within the context. You're not like breaking up pieces to fit it, but it actually would in its entirety make sense. There's really no
Yeah.
one
It
that
is
could be like,
cohesive. Mhm.
yeah, there's really no one that could be like, that's not true.
Refute
Because,
that. At best,
and
they could offer a different
yeah,
perspective or a different take.
that's
Mhm.
fair, right? There
And that's a
is,
dialogue that you can open up with other readers or just like whoever else is like criticizing the work, if you will.
so then when we put that in perspective as well, knowing what we know about how to analyze literature or media and whatnot, we were giving the tools from a very young age, from even junior high to college, if you went to college, but at least to high school, right?
Mhm.
Even elementary school. There was always
Yeah, I remember
this,
learning about
yeah,
similes and
metaphors.
metaphors and in terms of when you're writing and how to
Hmm.
develop some of that. Yeah, I remember doing that and or learning some of that in elementary and even middle school. I think in
Yeah.
middle school was when I really kind of got more into, or that I remember it being more really paying attention to the text, not just at face value, but really seeing like, okay, what is this saying? What can
Yeah.
you infer from this? And learning, like you said, about the different devices that you can look at the text through. Yeah.
Hmm. So I guess going back to knowing what the intentions of the author is, what our role as the audience is, right? And I think that's where things go wrong because, as we previously established, a well fleshed out story is authentic to the human experience, right? So that
Right.
means that the character in the story is not perfect. They have flaws. Their choices have consequences. Whether the decision they make is considered morally right, right? Like
Yeah.
we and that's our bias I guess, as an audience.
Yeah.
I guess a good example would be like if you have a story that shows characters with heavy flaws or some sort of trauma and make dark choices. The depiction, especially one that's trying to be authentic, has to show how those dark choices naturally fall out depending on whatever choice it was. And not only how that choice affects the character, but also how it affects the people around them, right?
Yeah.
Because
Shout out to
you
an
can't,
anti-hero. Yeah.
well, not even an anti-hero, but in general, you can't have a character who does something and it never comes back to bite them in the butt. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I
Because
can't
it
in
wouldn't
real
be
life.
authentic, like you
Yeah.
said. Yeah.
Like if in real life, if I killed somebody, like there are,
Consequence.
consequences to that. But if a character kills someone and it never comes back at all, and, I feel like there has to be some sort of payoff in order to like push the story forward or to flesh out the character further, even flesh out other characters, because it doesn't necessarily always have to come back to the character. It can affect somebody else
Yeah.
completely, right? I think, I guess, when it comes to depiction versus endorsement or romanticization, if something was added to the story just cause or just for the drama and it makes no true impact to the story or the character, then yeah, I could see how things would fall into the romanticization of it all. And there's no reason why that should have been done by the creator.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's interesting when you talk about like the role of the audience and how there are different takeaways that people can have. And that's because obviously people have different backgrounds, have different experiences. So even like the
Mhm,
subject matter of the book itself, one can
mhm.
relate to it, or maybe one cannot necessarily relate to it. But then as you're taking on the story, as you're consuming the character developments, their actions and such, you can develop certain reactions to what you're reading, right? And it
Yeah,
could, like we've talked about, like with when we were talking about the Love Island episode, right? You could be projecting your own biases
yep,
into it and whatever you're reading into it. And it's not necessarily that like the author intended it so, but that's what you're picking up from what they're putting down, you know? And so that is also
yeah,
part of, I think, the dialogue that it's okay. Yes, we have all these tools to analyze these devices and everything, but then there's also an implicit bias that we have as consumers and because of our experiences, our backgrounds and stuff.
mhm,
But so it's just something to be like considerate of as you're reading this and making your own like assumptions or your own reactions to it. I think it's interesting to kind of have those conversations too because a lot of the work that you do when you're consuming literature or media, you're interrogating it, right? Like, okay, what's this saying to say and what was this? What was that? But then you're also like interrogating yourself and it's like the assumptions that I'm making and such and be like, is this a good take on it? But then it's
yeah,
also like it is also very subjective sometimes because it
mm,
is like coming from you, right?
yeah,
So that's why there's all like that's why we always talk about nuance and how like context is important.
yeah. And I think that's where the question arises, like, why is there a misunderstanding of something being depicted versus, again, being endorsed or romanticized? And I personally came to this conclusion, or again, have come to this conclusion because of the conversations that I've had in my personal life with people. And obviously we've seen it still too, because we've discussed it in other episodes
Mhm.
where, more than ever we have seen like a rise, I think, in moral purity, which I think we can agree has greatly, again, influenced our current political climate and
Mhm.
has also been influenced by cancel culture itself.
Right.
Again, we discussed how conservative religions or conservative religious views are being encouraged to kind of determine what laws we have in place for this country, but
Yeah.
also the type of moral code you should have.
Right.
And this is on both sides, right? Because we have seen how progressive
Religions often do
spaces,
that. Yeah.
yeah, but even progressive spaces really dived into cancel culture because it started out as a good thing, where
Right.
people,
Calling out
yeah,
problematic
problematic
behaviors.
people, such as like
Yeah.
sexual harassment, racism, all that stuff. However, I do think we are now in a place where anything can get canceled, anything or anyone can get canceled, because
Yeah.
there is this obsession with moral correctness. It has, honestly, I think it hasn't left any space for nuance, even though we love to, like, really say how much life is nuanced. But I think
Yeah.
we're at a point now where there isn't even space for redemption. And I think that the media that we see now, or just the way that people are viewing media in general,
Hmm.
is encouraged by that type of psychology.
Right.
Because, like you said, people are analyzing media or forms of media through their biases because
Hmm.
of what they would consider moral, or, like you said, what they believe.
Their own worldviews and beliefs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Including religious or
yeah.
morals, like you said. Yeah.
And so, in their eyes, whatever media doesn't align with their moral code is considered problematic
Problematic.
or
Yeah.
impure or even
Yeah.
ethically
Okay.
unsafe, right? It's not
Right.
right.
Yeah, and this is why you've had such a rise of people, what is it, banning books and
Mhm.
important works of literature.
Yep.
And I would just like to say that I agree with you talking about like the rise of moral purity and the psychology behind that and cancel culture and how that has played a role in it. But I think ultimately the rise of media illiteracy and just we have an education crisis at hand. And why is that? Because our fucking education system is in the dumps, okay?
Mhm.
Our fucking administration doesn't give a shit about people going to school. That's why we have to pay hella prices to go to college.
There's
They
literally an agenda
discourage
discouraged.
education.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
discourage education for anybody, obviously for women specifically, so that they can keep them down. But also, this administration knows that by being able to, like, for people not going to school, not being literate, or just not being analytical about anything, they wouldn't question what you have, like your president telling you what this, your political party is telling you that is okay and is not okay. And so they just take everything and that's how they lead their lives based on what's being told to them without actually questioning shit.
And
So
can
it's
I
just like,
also, oh, sorry.
no, no, I'm just echoing on the fact that the reason why we're in this too is largely, in fact, because our country has failed us,
Hmm.
in terms of building up the educational system and having education accessible for all. They got rid of DEI. We're drowning in student loans. We've talked about previously how we're like, do we go back to school? But then it's like, oh, it's so expensive. And
Yeah.
like, I will have to take a pay cut. It sucks that you have to be like, do I make a decent living or go back to school? It's just so unfortunate. And it's like, there's so many other countries that don't do that. But anyways, I do think that it is a huge failing on our government too, on why Americans are very illiterate.
I would also like to point out that the same people who are discouraging people to actually get a higher education are still putting their kids in higher
Yes,
education institutions.
exactly.
So
So it's not about
make it
like,
make sense.
yeah. So it's really like, who do they want to
Because if
have
you're
the
if they're saying it's
education?
it's a scam, then why are they also falling into
Putting
this scam if it's, just food for thought. But
exactly.
I also kind of wanted to piggyback off of what you were saying about, like, I guess the ways of what's going on politically, and
Hmm.
like, do we going back to school, or like having to pick with between work and, things that,
Surviving.
survival, right?
Yeah.
I think especially now, because there is this I, at least, again, from my experience and the conversations that I've had with people, I think that there is this desire for simplicity in terms of core beliefs. I think we had discussed this in another episode in the previous season, where you mentioned, and you brought it up earlier too, about the rise of, like, the morally gray media and the rise of
Yeah.
the anti-hero, right? Where
Yeah.
characters who are not morally good, but they are also not morally bad, which, again, it does force us as the audience to see that there is nuance in the world, and that bad people can
It's
do
not
good
bad.
things and good people can do terrible things, right? I
And
think
good people
people,
can get into like, make mistakes. People
yeah.
are not on pedestals. Yeah.
But I think also right now people are sort of in denial about that because like you said, it makes them question their own moral framework. Because
Yeah.
if this person believes the same things that I do, but the world says that they're evil, does that make me evil? Am I evil? But I know I'm not evil, so how are they evil? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
again, their
You
whole world is
questioning
being
everything.
rocked. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been rocked. And so it's a huge reckoning for people. And some people don't like that. They don't like to feel that. And it scares them.
Yeah.
And that's what leads them to have these like bigoted ideas or be closed minded and not really want to lean into it or even just like understand more than anything or like ask questions about it. They're very quick to dismiss that,
Yeah.
especially if it doesn't adhere
Or
to
even
what
the
they
act
believe
of people questioning them, they
as
get
offensive.
defensive. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said about one being having questions about one's beliefs. Let's say if I'm here and I'm asking you questions about your beliefs or whatever convictions you have, it doesn't necessarily need to be that I'm coming at you like sideways.
Yeah.
It could very much be coming from a place of me wanting to understand what is at the core of
Whatever.
those beliefs or that mentality, right? Because
Mhm.
I don't understand, because I don't have those same beliefs, etc. So it is a matter of asking questions to understand you better, not necessarily to look for ways to I don't know,
Not
attack
even to change your
you
mind or
or to
anything.
change it or to
Yeah.
sort of find holes in it, you know? But at the end of the day, if the holes are there, I'm going to call them out, you know? Like, because if I don't understand, like, wait, you know, it's like you talked about it earlier when you were like, the same people that are like discouraging and making it hard for us to go to school and stuff are also still
And
putting
saying
their
that
children
school's a
through school.
scam, and yeah, exactly. So make it make
Yeah.
sense because it doesn't make sense to me,
So
just
it's
saying.
like, sorry, I'm observant. Sorry. Anyway.
Sorry.
Yeah. Um,
But going back to like the media aspect of it, and um I think people find it almost mentally comforting to be able to categorize the world into simple binaries, right? There's
yeah.
good versus evil, and then there's right versus wrong. And again, we've discussed how movies and books are and historically also have been a form of escapism, right, for us,
Yeah.
especially during very difficult times in history. I
Yeah.
think everyone is so overwhelmed with all the negativity in the world that obviously we've used media as a way to decompress from all the stresses of the world. But I do think that ultimately people don't want to think when it comes to media. And I think that's why there is such a push when it comes to having nuance in media,
Hmm.
because they're basically demanding that the media that they're ingesting be a very clear and concise, almost even like a moral instruction manual, if you will, right? Because
Like, wow, what a follower. Like, you're just like willing to like take it all in and not even question it or think about it in a more deep level. Like, just
I
tell me
think
what it is so
because
I can just take it for face value.
I think because it's safe though, because
Yeah, that is
yeah,
why it
right?
is. Yeah, and
Because
it doesn't take work.
yeah, it doesn't take work, but then also if you have characters that are flawless, they're perfect, right? And
It
it's
validates your own beliefs and existence.
yeah, but it allows you to escape from the fucked up world because it's like, well, that's not real life, but it's nice to fantasize about what life or the world could potentially be
Could
because
potentially
we
be.
have this type of media. And, I wish that that's how life was. So I think when we have media that is kind of portraying or, depicting what's going on in the world or what has happened in the world, people are like, I don't need a reminder of that. I already know what's going on. I already know what happened. Or
Are
I
you
don't.
sure though? Because why the fuck are we still here? I'm still sitting at the restaurant. America's still sitting at the restaurant, you guys. Like, what do you mean? I don't need to be reminded about what it was back like decades ago in the 1800s and 1900s. What do you mean? Like, people haven't fucking learned. This is why we are where we are.
No, but that's
History
like you
is
said.
repeating itself because we don't fucking get it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, but like you said, it's also something they also want to ingest something that doesn't challenge their views, or if
Right.
they do happen to see something that challenges their views, they get triggered, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is triggering, and that brings me to my next point because I think, and no offense to people and at all, like I think that the rise of self care has played a role in this because, again, I don't think there is anything wrong with bringing attention or encouraging self-care. But I do think it would be naive to dismiss that there is some type of side effect because we've always talked about how when we go from one extreme, there's going to be a pendulum swing to the other extreme, right? I mean, you and I have said it sometimes too, like for the sake of my mental health, I'm not going to do this or I'm not
I'm
going to
not
do
going to
that.
partake.
Yeah, I'm not going to partake. So I think that we've got into a place where people have started conflating discomfort with danger. And I say that because you see people treating media they consume. How can I explain this? It's almost like they're treating it as like a physical space because
Mhm.
if and I guess an example is if you have a book that's portraying themes of toxicity or depicting
Mhm.
some type of danger that again disturbs their peace or makes them question again their own moral beliefs, it's now unsafe and therefore they have to criticize it or they've determined that it's dangerous. And this is like you said, this is why we get to a point where stuff is starting to get banned.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not saying
They
that people
vilify
cannot,
it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not saying people can't have boundaries. I understand that some stuff can be triggering for people because of the stuff that they've experienced. Totally get that. But I'm mostly talking about how people mistake emotional discomfort, which can lead to growth, right? We've been in
Yes.
uncomfortable
We need
spaces.
to sit
This
in
is
our
what
feelings.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is what bitch up is about. That's our whole mantra, right? It's like
Yeah.
we need to step out of our comfort zone in order to grow.
Here's the comfort zone. Here's
How
where the
can I
magic happens.
yeah, yeah. But then they take that and they mistake that for like actual psychological harm because they're like, "Oh
Yeah.
no, this is not for me. This is dangerous. This like I can't." So,
And you
yeah.
sort of hinder yourself.
Mhm.
I like the point that you made about the rise of self-care and how that has sort of played a role or influenced the way people have either chosen to sort of excuse themselves or bar themselves from some of these things, right?
Yeah.
And let's be fucking real. I'm not surprised. Like it's not like they're not influence each other. That there's a
Mhm.
rise of self care when we live in a country that like capitalist country, I mean capitalist society or whatever that pushes this narrative of individualism, and also when you have like a country that doesn't fucking want to pay for medical care and access to things like. The reason they're commercializing all of this and selling you all these fucking stupid products of like this is what you need to take for self-care. This is all the lotions you need to put on. This is all the things you need to put in your body so you can
Mhm.
have self-care. These are all the things you need to do. And you have to fucking pay for it. When it's like, if I had access to good food, right? Like FDA, whatever, like fucking food restrictions, get your shit together. This is why we have that. What is it? Why is everybody shitting themselves right now?
Well, this is what happens when you dismantle what's supposed to
Yes,
protect you from these things.
exactly. And I was like, the fact that I don't have access to good foods, the fact that I don't have access to good third spaces where I can go and exercise and do stuff, the fact that I don't have access to good medical health care, the fact that I am like literally in survival mode the whole time because I don't make a decent living and I have to, figure out how to pay for shit, how to help my family and everything like that. Why are you guys pushing all these? Like, I wouldn't need all these things if you guys just afforded a decent living to me without it being like all these hoops and bounds, It's all being pushed by capitalism because you're just like, here, buy this so that your life is less shitty. And it's like, no, I just need my government to fucking back me up. Like, I
Yeah.
just need that. I need to make a decent living so I'm not stressed out. Do you know that, have you heard how Mayor or Governor Mondami in New York is just doing wonders, and he's just like the socialist king that he is. I think they put in effect, I think, rental freezing for certain buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the way people were talking about the mental unload that was to know that I don't have to worry about my rent increasing because I know that my pay isn't necessarily increasing and that now I can like focus on this and that. Like it does wonders to your psychology and like to your body as well. And that's what I mean. It's just like all it takes is for my government to back me up. That's all I need. I don't need a fucking other serum, anti-wrinkle serum. I don't need a fucking deep blow. I don't need Ozempic.
No, I think that that's a good point. And I actually, speaking of that, like the backup, right? I actually
Mhm.
saw this interview of Law, who's the, oh my God, what is he? He is the stylist for Zendaya.
Mhm.
And he was talking about how much she's been an advocate for him and has
Yes.
always supported him.
I
And
think I
like
saw
one,
that too. Yeah.
yeah, and one thing he said that made me think about how corporate works, because I think that that's something that we've been seeing us as corporate girlies, that we see a lot in corporate. And he said, like, the way you show people you care is by changing their financial, or just their
Their
economic,
finances.
their
Yeah.
finances. And that made me think about like the people that we've been surrounded by, right? Because it's like, yeah, we've had people look out for us and like literally
I thought the
advocate for
same thing.
our financial status also. So I'm like, when you put it in the context of a government, right? It's like, yeah, if you cared about us, you would
Advocate for
change,
us. Yeah.
advocate for us, and make sure that we are taken care of in every sense. And I think that was a good point about the commercialization of stuff, because we've definitely been programmed to see entertainment as a reward, right? Because like
Mhm.
you said, we're living paycheck to paycheck. Your job is stressful, but hey, if you work hard enough, you can go buy those tickets for your favorite artists. You can go home after this and
Go to
watch
the
your favorite
theater.
show and
Yeah.
relax. So I think when it
All
comes
these
to
streaming
media,
platforms. Yeah.
yeah, seeing or reading, and going back to like the idea that people want to be comforted by the media that they watch, they don't want to be reminded of the hardships that they're currently
Mhm.
experiencing. I
Yeah.
think that because reading or seeing media now for some people requires you to know complexity and for you to process being uncomfortable,
Not have
and
your head in your asshole or someone
yeah,
else's asshole, like, you need to, like, know these things
yeah,
because
but
otherwise
it's emotionally draining for some people. And then that made me think of why people get so mad at the Disney remakes, right? Because you take something that was comforting to you as a child, and
I
now
relate
you
to
made
that,
it
yes.
political because you're trying to be woke and you're trying to have representation because that's morally correct now. Or some people would say they're trying to fix things that were considered racist or misogynist back then to make
Right.
things right. And some people have an issue with that because it's like, oh, why are we trying to fix
Remake.
everything, right?
Right.
Or yes, and it's all intersectional, right?
Yeah.
Everything has to do with everything. There's a reason why we see a certain shift when it comes to media literacy, really, and why people are taking certain forms of media, or I guess interpreting the way that they do, right?
Right. That's a good point. I mean, because I have famously been very vocal about how I haven't enjoyed, not that I haven't enjoyed the remakes, it's been more of like, I don't want to see the remakes, you know?
Okay.
And it was just like, it's such a nostalgia for me. Like The Lion King, for example, I don't need to see a live version of it. But I will say that the live actions that I have seen, like The Little Mermaid, I love that one. That was nice. I think Belle was a great one too. I really enjoyed that one. And
Hmm.
I didn't have the same issues that most people were up in arms. Like I remember for The Little Mermaid, it was controversial because um she was played by an African American queen and people
Yes,
had an
love
issue with
her.
it because they were just like, like Little Mermaid was
Ariel's
not.
right.
And I was like, she's a mermaid. Okay, she's not even human, first of all.
Yeah.
She was a cartoon also. She was a fish, you guys. No, I'm kidding.
No, I think that also kind of made me go into why, like, why the use of characters are so important and why it's super important for an author to be intentional with the use of their characters, because of the attachment that people make with them, right? Again,
Yeah.
we see the morally gray characters. Obviously, when it comes to shows or even movies, there is a protagonist bias, because when you're introduced as an audience to the main character, we often align ourselves with them, right? Because
Yeah.
we take it as this is the person who anchors, well, they are technically the person that anchors the entire story, but also their moral code is a
We try to align
reflection
our
of
of
us,
us.
right? It's
Yeah.
a mirror, right?
Yeah.
So when you have morally great characters who again do things that we wouldn't do, but they're the main
They're
character and we've
problematic.
aligned
Yeah.
them ourselves with them, it's like, oh, why would they do that? I wouldn't do that. And then they're like, oh, I don't like this show. It's like, it doesn't seem like that's something that should be done. Or obviously there's also the whole concept of like depiction in movies versus the book, right? Sometimes
Right.
stuff is changed in the film or in the
Or
show.
even the shows, we talked about that
Yeah.
recently. Yeah.
Yeah, so it might be a certain way in the book and then they changed it in the show, and a lot of people tend to have a lot of issue with that. They're like, "No, it has to be exactly alike." And, we see it again with the Disney movies and stuff about
And
how,
we've
like,
seen
people
that
want it to be word like, literally.
they don't want change,
Yeah.
man. I do think there's all because it's uncomfortable, right? Like
Mhm.
having to deal
Yeah.
with that, like you said. And why does it have to be uncomfortable though? And I think it's a perspective thing too. Where
Mhm.
where now that you're talking about, like I'm thinking a lot about like like I'm thinking about our conversation that we had for Wuthering Heights too, right? Where like and obviously other people also had their takes, and people were also up in arms about it because it's like such a classical like piece of literature, and we
Yeah.
talked about like the whether she was staying true to the material, to the characters and stuff, and then at the end of the day, we also chucked it up to, well, first of all, it's a female that's putting it forth. Her interpretation and her perspective obviously influenced her choices. She made a movie for herself too,
Yeah.
like so it's just like, and that was very well reflected in it, and in her approach and her
Yeah.
stylistic approach,
Again, what was her intention? What is she trying to
yes,
portray? And I
and
think
that's what people were
also
missing when they were like,
yeah.
ah, and I was just like, first of all, she never said she was going to make a movie for you guys. If you guys want that movie, you guys go make it,
But
because
even the way it was promoted, it was never gonna be like it was literally like an inspiration of, right? Because
yeah,
even the book itself is never through Heathcliff or Catherine's point of view. It's through a
right,
side character. And the
exactly, and
movie
that, yeah,
was through Catherine or Heathcliff's point of view. Like technically it was
mhm,
Catherine's, I think. Or
yeah,
like, it wasn't through Lucy's point of view. So
right.
in itself, it's like, yeah, the point of view is going to be different because as a side character, there's limited perception, right? You only
Mhm.
know so much as a side character, but if you're
And
basing it off a different character,
you have your own
interpretation,
biases.
yeah, their
Yeah.
own biases, exactly. So it's like, again, there's nuance to this. When you're
Mhm,
interpreting media, what is the point of view, right? What point of view is the author or the creator or the director, whatever, depicting? And that's
mhm.
how you need to approach it. You can't automatically criticize it because it's not according to what the book said. Because now,
Right.
if it's exactly the same perspective as it is in the book and they
Or
fucked a
if
whole
that
bunch of
was the
shit up,
intent. Yeah.
sure, I can give you that. You know what I
Like,
mean?
you can understand, like, the criticism at least, especially if it's coming from a place where they're really interrogating, like, "Oh, let's see how it holds up to the thing," but not in a sense where your intention is to just completely berate the film and the people that made it, like, if it wasn't any
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Well, like,
And
I think
even
one of the oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, and then I was just thinking about, like, the recent commentary on the Odyssey too, because I know that they've been getting a lot of commentary too because of the casting and the this.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a lot of, reviews on it now that it's out because I wanna watch it first.
Yeah, same.
But, I did see a lot of, like, the little commentary about the casting and things like that, and
Yeah.
obviously, people are always gonna have opinions on it.
I'm like, coming I was like, I don't know,
I was like, "And
because
how many of you read the Odyssey?"
I was gonna say that because
Just kidding.
I'm like, I haven't read certain books and that's why I'm like, I haven't read the book. So when people complain about the film, I'm like, I can't really say
You're
anything
like, "I
because
have
I
no bone
think
in this fight."
I have no bone in this. But I'm like, I think even when I have read the books, I always go into movies open minded. And we've talked about it too. I think when it ends with us, some things are not as easily depicted in visually as they would be in the book, right? Because again, you have your own interpretation, you have your own imagination of how some things happen. And some people are like,
And
that's not
that's
who I
all
imagined the main
and that's
character to
from
be, you
you,
know?
and that
Yeah,
yeah, and that's such a subjective point of view, right? When we're reading things, the way we imagine things, it's based on our own experiences, on our own beliefs and shit. Yeah, naturally, you weren't the one that made it, so the perspective would have been a little different, you know?
exactly. I think one of the things that you and I had recently discussed was the show called The House of the Dragon, which is like a
Yes.
prequel to Game of Thrones, right? And it's based on this book called A Song of Ice and Fire, which is basically more of a history book. At least that's how I've understand it's been written. I personally have not read it, but I have heard a lot. I have seen a lot of discourse. I have seen a lot of analytical essays on it and a lot of explanations on it, right? But I have watched the show and I understand that there has been certain changes that have been made to the story. And from my understanding, because A Song of Ice and Fire is more so from the perspective of like third parties and like maesters. And again, as we know with history, history is always written in the perspective of the winner. So
The
there
winner,
will
yeah.
be some biases when it comes to telling the story of someone who is depicted as the enemy, right? So I think a lot of people have had a gripe with the show because even George R. Martin, who wrote the book, has had he kind of separated himself from the show because he's like, this isn't my story, which completely understand if it's
Yeah,
coming
it's
from the
fair.
author, right? That's
Yeah.
fair. But also, again, people are like, this isn't what happened. But I'm like, my understanding is if this is a history book, the perspective can really be anything because we don't
Yeah.
really know what happened, right? We're just reading it from maesters who didn't like this person. And so they just wrote shit in. And it's like people that don't really know the nuance of the actual person, right?
Yeah.
And then going back to the whole Game of Thrones thing, I think that one of the things that, and it kind of goes back into choices that are made by creators
Mhm.
that if you're going to do something, it needs to add to the plot, it needs to add to the character, right? One of the
Mhm.
criticisms that I saw for Game of Thrones, and this is a little spoiler for you, but there's a grape scene in the series, but in the book, it doesn't happen to that character. It happens to a different character. But they applied that storyline to that character. And people were upset with it because they're like, it didn't add anything to the plot for her storyline.
Mm.
But I'm like, but if you're looking at it from the perspective of like the choices that are being made, there's a lot of secondary characters, right? You have characters that are making choices that not only affect them but affect other people. So even if she made certain choices that maybe led her to be where she's at, but other people made certain choices that led her to be where she's at too, and
Yeah.
it affected her. So there's this other character, his name is Theon, and he used to be like, he was raised basically by her family, right? And considered a brother, whatever, but he did some very questionable things, basically betrayed the whole family. And then eventually he kind of was tortured by this enemy, and like his dick got cut off, everything. And he renamed him Reek. And like he really broke him down psychologically.
Wow.
Like the person that this person used to be is no longer that. And so he became a very meek person. And the grape scene basically involved that person graping the female, and making him watch it happen. And so as
Mhm.
the audience, you're very much like hoping and kind of like rooting for Reek to snap out of it and help her, right? To stop him, to kill this person, right?
Right.
And it kind of made me look back as to how, again, some characters are used because I think when you're watching a character after so long and getting an insight on the way that they think or just seeing the suffering that they've experienced,
Mhm.
even though we may not like the character from the beginning, there is an understanding of why they may
They
have
are the way
acted
that
and
they
done some
are.
things. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then how they got to be, right? And some people may excuse the behavior, but I think a good story doesn't excuse the behavior. It shows the consequences. And that scene, even though it may not have impacted or change, I guess it wouldn't have really impacted who she was as a person, but it impacted who he is as a person, right? All the bad decisions he made led her to be there, right? He betrayed her family. If he hadn't betrayed her family, would she, would her family all have died? You know, would
Mm.
all of this have happened? So I think
Right.
people need to remember it's like different perspectives. You have people like Rue. I think Rue is a really good example when it comes to like Euphoria, where obviously
Yeah.
we know she's a drug addict and she's caused a lot of destruction wherever
Mhm.
she is, and she's caused a lot of suffering to the people around her, right? But we
Yeah.
as viewers, we know why she is the way she is, right? She's that way. She got into the addiction because she's grieving her dad, but that still
Mhm.
doesn't excuse the behavior. So
Right.
again, and I think that's why a part of us wants to cheer for her and wants to, it breeds
Rooting for
sympathy
her.
for the character, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's great storytelling. It's like you're not excusing the behavior, not excusing the choices that were made, but there's still always the hope of redemption
Yeah.
in any good story. And sometimes that's life, right? There's always the hope for redemption. And I think that's where we've lost the plot here because I'm like, you have this moral compass and you're not allowing people to show redemption. It's not excusing behavior or necessarily saying forget the decisions that people made or the actions that were made. As long as your people are owning up to what they did and choosing every day to be a better person, I think is what we need to start keeping in mind or
Or
remembering.
encouraging at
Yeah.
least.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, obviously, like, if you don't want to, whether it is like forgive the character or even forgive the person, right? Like, since we're talking about morals and stuff, even though
Mhm.
they apologized and they took accountability, like, that's fine. That's like that's your prerogative. Like, you're allowed. But that doesn't mean that like that it just misses the fact that this person is still on their redemption tour or on their redemption arc, if you will, right? Like, they could still very much do that, even if you're choosing not to um receive it or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Like, people should still be allowed to do that. It's not like you just dismiss people overall and like they just
Yeah,
fall
exactly.
into the abyss.
I think one of the movies that obviously we've discussed a lot that I guess is a really good example of like
Mhm,
depiction versus endorsement, I would say, or romanticization is
mhm.
Gone with the Wind. Um, I personally have not read the book, but I have seen the movie, and I
Okay.
know over time both the film and the movie have been recognized as problematic, right? So it's like, let me put in my little research, put all of these things that we talked about, like what makes a good story? How do we determine if it's endorsed or if it's supposed to be a depiction of, history, blah, blah, blah. So again, I didn't really know anything about the author, so I had to do my little research. And the book was written by Margaret Mitchell. She was born on November 8th in 1900, literally, and she died August
Scorpio.
16th, 1949 in Atlanta, Georgia, which is super important, okay? Keep in mind the time that she grew up in, right?
Mhm, and the location too.
And location. So she started writing the book in 1926, so roaring 20s, literally. And apparently, her intention for wanting to write this book is because well, first of all, I guess she had hurt her ankle or something. So she was like super bored and was like reading
Oh my
the
god.
entire library in her house. And then I don't know if it was her husband or something,
She's
was
like,
like,
"Nothing speaks to me. I should just
yeah,
make
she's
my
like,
own
why don't you
story."
just write something instead of having to read it? So that's what she did. And basically, she wanted to write a story on the Civil War and the Reconstruction era
Mhm.
from the Southern point of view because she felt that
They were the
much of this.
victims. I'm just kidding.
No, well, I think
They
much
were
of the
the
Civil.
losers of the war, so they're like, "I need to post something in our POV, you guys." I'm just kidding.
It's funny. She did say that she didn't. Well, I'll get to that. So
Yeah.
again, yeah, because basically she thought that any literature that was related to the Civil War at that time, again, highly favored and exalted the northern point of view, right?
Yeah.
And obviously during the time that she grew up, she lived through World War One and like I said, the Roaring Twenties. So she became fascinated with I guess the psychology of what differentiates those that survive such a societal collapse versus those that perish. And so she kind of opted to use the Confederacy as the backdrop to explore this theme of, again, psychological resilience. So that's her intention. That was her reasoning for doing this. But she did use firsthand war accounts from family members who were Confederate veterans. So clearly it was close to home for her.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, I'm glad you brought that up about, like, obviously she wanted to kind of put in, like, the idea that the South, was, like, the good people or what, but apparently she was, like, so immersed in the mythology of the Confederacy that she didn't realize that the South had lost the war till she was, like, 10 years old. Like, the whole time that her family was telling her these stories, like, she really thought that the South had won by the way that they were talking about it, right?
Mhm. Everybody was in denial.
Yeah. And so when it comes to the idea of this movie or even the book endorsing or romanticizing the Confederate cause or just slavery in itself, you kind of have to look into what exactly is being portrayed in the book and what's being depicted, right? So we
Yeah.
have obviously the lost cause myth, which again, the movie it depicts antebellum South, right? And I think obviously the reason people say that it is romanticizing slavery is because the author romanticizes antebellum South or just the Confederacy by
Mhm.
framing pre-war South as like this paradise, right? And we see it in the movie because I think the movie obviously I think people clearly have some respect for the movie only because of its cinematography, right? Because it was revolutionary for
for
its
its time,
time.
for sure.
Yeah.
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 I
Because
mean,
you
to this
see,
day, you watch it and it holds up pretty well. And it's like, what? This came out in 1936?
speaking of
Speaking
Wuthering
about it
Heights,
from, yeah,
Wuthering Heights was inspired by the cinematography of Gone with the Wind. The poster is inspired by the poster of
yeah,
Gone with the Wind, right? So there is
true.
influence there.
Yeah,
Obviously, in the movie, you see like the lighting, it's bright, it's colorful, it's soft and gentle. And the fact that it's depicting the South that way, it's depicting it as this dreamy, romantic era, right? Even the
right.
music, I think, is like very romantic. It plays into it, right? And
Yeah,
it completely ignores the fact that this paradise was prosperous because of the fact that it was built on slavery, right? It
slavery. Yeah,
totally ignores that. And this is why people have an issue because even the Black characters in these forms of media are depicted as being extremely loyal and
yep.
content to be in the
The
position
happy
that they are in.
servant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
You have characters like Mammy who express I almost are kind of resistant to the fact that everything around her is changing and the social order of things are changing. And you
Mhm.
see her kind of really lock herself or keep herself really close to Scarlett, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't want to
To what
leave
she
her.
knows. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what she knows. She doesn't wanna leave her role
Holds
as a
on to.
servant. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's depicting like, "No, I like being here. I want to be here," right? And again, it's endorsing that pro-slavery argument that was being made at the time, right?
Right.
I
Yeah.
I know that some people sometimes have an issue with slurs, right, that are being used in books at the time. I think, what is it? The Adventures of Huckleberry
Huckleberry
and
Finn.
Finn?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know we read that in high school. I remember
Mhm.
reading that in high school, and you would obviously when you're reading out loud, you're like, "Don't say the slurs," but some people I know have, a problem with there being slurs in the book, which again, it depends on at the time what is being depicted in the book, what's being depicted, and
Yeah.
is it necessary, right? And I
Right.
think the author here obviously used slurs and stereotypes because she did rely on racist tropes, and she also, again, depicted, African Americans as either it was very binary. Either they're very well, I guess overall, they were simple-minded or very childlike, or if they were a threat to you, they were very animalistic, which we see
Mhm.
is a constant portrayal, especially in racist media. And usually the animalistic portrayal is for African Americans who were considered free, right? Especially in this movie. Like, and
Right.
it was during the Reconstruction era that there was a threat, and it
Yeah.
was
And
freed slaves, right?
yeah. And this is what Usher did, like Jim Crow and all that shit, because they were like, we have to figure out how we can control the situation and like keep
Mhm.
ourselves safe from the freed
The
folks.
Freed, yeah. And then
Yeah.
I remembered this stuck out to me when I watched it because as a kid, you're like, "Oh, okay." You don't really think too much about it because you don't really know the history of it, but obviously as you learn the history of, what is it? Slavery and everything, you kinda see why it's so problematic because in the movie, you have like, literally the KKK is depicted, and it's
Mhm.
depicted in a way where it's like a group of men are stepping up and
Saviors.
defending the
Yeah. And
honor of their
defending the
women.
honor. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So then it's like, obviously now you're endorsing the narrative of racial terror like we described, and you're
Mhm.
defending white supremacy. So
Right.
where do you get off? So it's like obviously it is problematic and you are endorsing it because of your background, where you grew up, how you grew up, the stories you grew up hearing, and the fact of how you choose to depict the theme that you're or the background, how you choose to depict the background because your theme is psychological resistance, right?
But it's in
Or
the
resilience
backdrop of
of a conf
antebellum.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then apparently she had received criticism from Black critics and the NAACP because obviously it was deemed racist, and she dismissed them privately by writing a letter, and she said, and I'm quoting this, okay? She said she would not allow troublemaking professional Negroes to dictate her feelings. And I'm like,
And
"Oh,
that sounds like what you were talking about earlier for people that were like, for my mental health. No, just kidding.
I'm not gonna deal with this."
Yeah. Oh, wow. She was very bold to say that and to do that and not the troublemaking because then she's right there even perpetuating the stereotypes that you were talking about earlier.
Mhm. Yeah,
Of
and I mean, I guess when you think about it, I mean, ultimately, based off of like what we've determined is the basis and what's good storytelling and how to differentiate between, depiction and whatnot, we could technically say that she was successful in her intent of capturing the
Mhm.
Southern perspective, right? Because I think that that's fair. I think that it's fair for people to maybe want to do a controversial perspective on history, right? However, you can't really absolve her from endorsing slavery because
Right.
ultimately the book or yeah, the cruelty of slavery was endorsed or it was validated
Mhm.
because the character themselves never questioned that behavior, right?
Exactly.
All
I mean,
all
Scarlett owned slaves,
she
and
yeah, she
that's
she
where her
never was
family's
like
wealth was built off of, and
exactly
that's why she was poor because of the Civil War and they lost, and that's why she's
yeah.
like, "I have to figure out how to get my money up."
And
And,
it
like
was never like she even questioned her own methods of how she got like if you were psychologically intending if you're the whole thing is portraying this woman as a resilient person in a time where women didn't have rights, sure, right? However, you never see her character question or even realize that the way that she's doing things is like a mirror of how the Confederacy
and this is
made
why they
their
lost.
living off of slavery, right? This is
Yeah.
how they make their money. She's using the same tactics and she never questions that. And also any
It's
character
shows.
that
Yeah.
that had a pushback, like there was never a depiction of a character that really pushed back on that behavior either, or any
Mhm.
pushback
There's no
on the
one really
violence.
yeah, no
Yeah.
one really challenged it.
Yeah. Even some people could say like Rhett challenged it, but it's like, cause he didn't believe in the war. He's like, oh yeah, you guys are like romanticizing it. But at the
Yeah.
same time, he never,
But then he was
he
still choosing to align himself with this
The
woman
with
who
no, well,
he
not even that, the behavior of it. Like, he still
yeah,
didn't like the behavior of slavery and all that stuff. He's like, "Oh, yeah," like, he never
he was
once denounced
indifferent
it.
to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that's why I'm like, "Okay, I get why people are, like, critiquing it," right? It's like, yeah, you should it is an endorsement, and it is, I don't wanna say it's dangerous, but there definitely has to be some form of education that comes when you are
Talking about this subject
talking,
matter.
especially
Yeah.
classic books that do have that type of that's
Problematic
problematic.
history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that comes to the question, how should modern media handle older problematic classics?
Well, I don't think that the answer is banning them.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, within reason, because one would say that, like, we don't need to see Birth of a Nation anymore, or no one should be seeing that ever again. But I don't think that banning should be the answer to it. I think that we could recognize that these texts are what they are, but like obviously they don't stand alone, right? Like you said, like there's context to this. Like you look at the writer, the creators or whatever, their background, where they're from, and how that influenced the art that they put out or like the media that they put out. And then you also are considerate of the fact of like why it's problematic and have honest conversations about it. And just like you were talking about, like, Gone with the Wind was such a like what is it, like a movie success and whatever, and it has all these great features. It is a great film like to watch as like a viewer, if you will. But then
Yeah.
you can't just like shy away, like you said, from the fact that it's problematic, and you can have an open dialogue. And I think you get more out of the movie by having that context, that historical context, and just again interrogating it, right? Because even as much as people want to say that it was romanticized, and it makes sense because I mean, who wrote it and whatever, you
Mhm.
could also look at it like it was an analogy for the death of the South and Scarlett wanting to go back to how it was or whatever, trying to win Rhett back and stuff, was her trying to like keep or go back to the way things used to be in the South because it was all slipping away from her. And and that was her own demise too, because she like many other Southerners and Confederates that still haven't let go of the fact that they lost the war, are still out here trying to make fetch happen. And it's like caused their demise. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was yeah, I mean, I think it's a good film. I definitely think it's problematic for like the reasons you've stated. And I do think that, like we were talking earlier, two things can be true, right? It could be a great film,
Mhm.
but it also does not escape the nuance of how controversial it was, and being vocal about those things. And I think this is why, like, even with books, when I was looking at this, and thinking of like, how do we approach literature like that, right? I think there's that concept, I think we've brought it up previously, where people are reading like two texts at the same time, or just doing two things, because you're able to kind of compare, and sort of it even acts as like a counterbalance, right? It's a different perspective. So as you watch this film, maybe you can watch a different film that maybe elevates other voices and the other perspectives, right? Because obviously there's a very narrow
Provides
perspective,
context, like you
and it
said. Yeah.
provides context, exactly. And so then your takeaway from the film, it's a lot more valuable, and there's a lot more depthness to it than you just being like, oh wow, like poor people from the South, they're like they lost their wealth,
Yeah.
like, oh my God, they were like poor people, like they were always get bagged on, like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like no.
And I think, honestly, I think doing research on the author herself, I think, is a good example of how we can't l- we can't judge a book by its cover, but there is nuance because obviously the way she grew up and everything. But
Mhm.
apparently in her later life, she did realize she did kind of turn a page and became kind of progressive, and she realized, what racist system she grew up with. So she did do things in her later life to kind of amend for that.
Or at least
Apparently,
try to, yeah.
yeah, apparently she funded Black medical students in the 1940s. She aligned herself with this doctor called Benjamin Mays, who I think was the president of Morehouse College at the time. And
Mhm.
she did it anonymously, right? So she wasn't like out here promoting it, but she went ahead and funded medical students. I think it was around almost 80 Black students.
Mhm.
And then she also made an attempt to fight segregation, and help desegregate the Atlanta police force. And lastly, I think she was friends with, I think, well, if I remember this correctly. So basically, she was mad when the Black actress Hattie McDaniel,
Mhm.
um, she's the one that played Mammy in the movie.
Yeah.
She was barred from attending the 1939 Atlanta movie premiere because of the
Fucking
segregation laws in
daily.
Georgia. So Mitchell reached out to her and they basically became friends. So I'm like, oh, it's
I'd be like,
interesting.
you're my plus one. Let's
Yeah. I
go.
mean, yeah, because even, you have Marilyn Monroe who
I
did
did
that,
that
right?
too.
Yeah, did that
Yeah.
too. So I do think that obviously actions speak louder than words. And sometimes, people grow up with having a certain point of view because of their again, the cultural background or just their family. And if they're open enough to have these type of discussions and see what's out there in the world, then there should be grace for that. But again, there has to be effort put in, right, on either
Yeah.
side. But I did like the
It
point
can't
that
be performative,
yeah, it
right?
can't be performative, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that you made a good point about, I guess, approaching problematic media through, or educationally, I guess you can say, because I know that I've seen movies where they explicitly say that it contains like outdated cultural depictions, or it has like negative depictions of people or
Yeah.
cultures, right? And I actually read that modern editions of classic movies, novels,
Novels, yeah.
like Gone with the Wind, or like I said, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, have updated forwards that have been written by minority
Acknowledge.
scholars and historians
Yeah.
that acknowledge like the whole, provide context, obviously, of
Right.
what's going on. And then I think some studios have started implementing where they start their films with like a studio discussion, and again, it explains like the context of the era that that movie was made
That the
in.
movie was made in,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's like it kind of gives the watcher like, hey, like you're gonna see some things that are kind of racist and depicted, but this is why it was. You have to take in mind when it was made, who it was made by, and like the
Yeah.
beliefs that were happening at that time. And I think that's something important too, because often we have times where people will go back and like dig up shit from people that, they did when they were younger. And I'm not saying it's okay. But again, it's like, are we allowing the space and the grace for this person to grow? And have they shown that that's not who they are anymore? You know what I mean? Like if their
Yeah.
actions have shown like, oh, I was stupid, that was dumb, I understand the context and, you know, I'm really remorseful about it, but some
Yeah.
people won't let it go. Or it's so interesting how they purposely, like, especially when you see like new people that are up and coming, like instantly people go and look for shit. You know what I mean? Like, what can I
Yeah, and it's
find
like
on this
these people
person?
are young too. Like
Yeah.
you were young and stupid at some point.
Yeah. So I'm like, damn, bro, like what, like who hurt you? Or like, are you that bored? Or
Yeah.
is it a form of like, again, envy almost? Because it's like you're projecting your insecurities
Like
or
you're mad
something
that
on this.
they're viral or that they're
Yeah.
in this space and
Or
not
that it's
you.
like, oh, this person is like whatever looking, I'm better looking than them, and how can they make it big? Like something has to be wrong with them. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and let me go tear them down. And I was like, wow, like you need to work on
Yeah,
that.
calm
You
down.
need to do some yeah. You know, I will say too, especially when we're talking more about like classic work or things that have been classified as classics, especially like we're talking about American classics, right? A reason also I think that they don't necessarily need to be banned or should be banned, like we should be mindful of that, is because we don't want to be censoring stuff,
Mhm.
right? And then there's also like, just like with everything else we've talked about history, like these works say so much of the times, of the
Yep.
people, of
Mhm.
what was considered good or bad back then, you
Or
know?
what
And
was
so I
appropriate at the time.
what was appropriate, and so I think there's so much to learn from that, and there's so much value to learn from that. And again, you're going into it through an analytical lens, having the historical context that you should have, or at least you would hope that it would inspire you to look into it a bit further, right? Like even where you suggested Gone with the Wind, you know, obviously you went into to learn a little bit more about the author and really kind of figuring out some of these additional details and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a learning experience, and that shed a lot of color on like, oh, you know, like it makes sense why she put out this type of work and um
Take that
why she would
perspective.
exactly, right? And then and knowing that, then it's easier to interrogate too, because then you understand that these are the author's own biases that were reflected in it, right? And when you couple that with just like knowing what we know about history and everything, I think it again makes for more satisfying take away from it, at least. I do think it's also interesting because in with the rise of cancel culture, I do remember I did I did see a rise of canceling certain authors, people, or like works that were considered classics. Again, in American, I'm talking specifically American literature and stuff. And I remember when I saw some of that cancel stuff. For me, it was also a reckoning because there were authors and books and like, novels that I've like loved because that was kind of my introduction to literature and a lot of where I got to put into practice some of the tools that we were talking about of
Mhm.
how to take a text and seeing like what is it saying, but then also what does it reflect about society at the time and everything that was going on and everything. So like
Yeah.
you have, you know, these books become sort of like not necessarily personal, but they're relatable to you in a certain level, or they're sort of beloved to you, for lack of a better word. So then then you're met with a like, oh yeah, but like this also author was racist, or oh, this author was a misogynist, because even the work that they put forth, don't
Mhm.
get me started on Tennessee Williams or William Faulkner, you know? And it's always like, oh my God, like and it's one of those like things where it's just like, fuck man, like this sucks. And I was like, yeah, like I need to start reading more female authors. What the fuck am I doing? Because
Yeah.
a lot of American literature and classics have glorified these like white men and the literature that they've put forth, right? But then it's like, how do you reconcile that? I can have honest conversations of who these men were, the work that they put, what it meant for the time, what it means now, and how it holds up nowadays, right? And then also when we think about like what's considered a classic versus what's not, all of that was obviously socially constructed. Someone somewhere said, hey, this is a classic, this author is untouchable because he put this work out, like Fitzgerald, you know, like I was talking about Tennessee and all these other people. And it's just like that was all just like a bunch of people, like who was in power, who was a white man that was like, this is the gold standard. Because there's so many other authors, American authors, that are not necessarily white, that have put forth, you know, bodies of literature that are deep and conjure a lot of feelings and stuff. Like when we talk about like Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou and stuff. So it was all just where it was just like, oh yeah, like you don't have to necessarily run to cancel it and then just take it away. Two things could be true, and you could just be more I think once you know, there's a certain responsibility as a reader, as a consumer, as you're taking this in, that you're also putting all those things into perspective, and that you do your due diligence to recognize how it intersects with all other aspects of society, right? And American culture.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've noticed a lot too recently is that a lot of people have, especially modern creators, will take a problematic classic and then adapt it from the perspective of like a marginalized character. I think I saw
Which is good.
um
Like that's fun to
what
like
it's
that.
interesting too, right? Because
Yeah.
I think it was The Great Gatsby. I think I saw a book where it reimagined it from the perspective of Daisy. I think it's called Beautiful Little Fool. Which iconic because it's an iconic line from the book, right?
Yeah.
And technically, I haven't read it, but it's always like I'm like, should I get it? Because it would be interesting to see from the perspective of Daisy, because all we know of Daisy is through Gatsby, right?
Gatsby
Like
and his own view.
she's portrayed to see like to have no agency. So it'd be interesting to see, especially as a woman in that time in the Roaring Twenties, like what was going through her mind, right? And
Right.
and funny enough, I think Gone with the Wind has a parody. It's called When Dawn Gone, which, like I said, it's a parody on Gone with the Wind, but it's
Mhm.
from the perspective of an enslaved woman who is supposed to be Scarlett's half sister, which again is an interesting perspective because it's like,
Because that
oh,
was hella true during that time. Like there was a
exactly.
lot of people, there was a lot of racial mixing there. We had like
Hmm.
you had
The realities
people.
of slavery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like also, and that brings us back to why the romanticization of Gone with the Wind is problematic, because it does delete like a majority
It
of the
whitewashes an
population
American
there.
tragedy.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
was like a majority of the South was Black Americans, and they're
And it
not in the
still
movie at
is.
all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the perspective is literally from a white supremacy, white race, like white perspective. So you're erasing a big part of that era and a big population of that time and place, right? And everything, and the tragedies and the monstrosities that were happening to a majority of the population. So,
Yeah, and the legacy that it's left, right? Like
mhm.
we're still living in that, unfortunately. How do you not acknowledge that?
And I thought it was cool as far as like books, because I didn't even, because obviously we discussed like how Wuthering Heights is technically a reimagining from a different perspective. But I'm like, oh yeah, like books, you could do that. And I think you're starting to see that more often. I know that some people take issue with it because it's like an author, like I know some people take issue when people kind of take the work of an author and kind of make it their own by doing a different perspective. I think you see that a lot with like the Harry Potter books where they like, do a little fandom book era. I
Fan
know,
fiction, yeah.
yeah, George R. R. Martin has said that he doesn't want people to like create more stories from his universe. Like he would prefer people to create their own universe because he doesn't like the idea of people taking a universe that somebody worked really hard on and then just kind of banking off of it, which is interesting,
Oh,
right? Because it's like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Like I
well,
worked
then you
really
shouldn't
hard on
have
this.
published the work then, sir,
And
because
then that's
news
all.
flash. No, just kidding.
Which is funny that you say that, because I think that's also like one of the things when it comes to media, that it's like whatever you work on, even if your intention is to explore a certain theme or a certain topic and you have like maybe clear intentions with it, once you put it out in the world, like it is what it is. Everybody's
Especially
opinion.
in the digital age that we live in now, where
Yeah.
and the amount of access, which is like funny because, well, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because the fact that we have the amount of like technology and the different what is it, the different mediums with which like this is consumed or whatever,
Hmm.
it has allowed for people, creatives that are putting stuff out there to profit in the ways that they have, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like you're not just putting the body of work out, but once you get the movie deals, once you get like the merch and all that, you're making bank, you
Yeah.
know? So I'm just like, fuck, share the wealth, you know, like, and get that pick that thee. Like, you already made your millions, sir. And not just that, like, let's be fucking real. We are like the cultural beings that we are, the influence that we all have with each other. It's not like it's like you can't. It's like it's not. It's like inevitable, you know, that you are going to influence the media that someone else puts forth, just like he was influenced by the media that was put forth before him and other fantasy worlds, you know? Like,
Yeah, but I
it's
think
not
that's
like it was an
different though.
original thought, you
No, but I
know?
think that's different because yes, like obviously he was influenced by like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars was influenced by Dune, right? But it's still like you took that inspiration and did your own thing. Even though maybe
Right.
the influences and like the references might have been from the same place, it's from a
Yeah.
different perspective and it was done differently, even though maybe similar themes were taken. Because obviously Lord of the Rings as a media is like it's a lot. It's like the
It is.
Bible of fantasy world, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so
It
much
really,
that goes into it.
it's the
Like literally,
standard even.
yeah,
Yeah.
like Tolkien literally built his universe and like kind of built like
By
a little
bricks.
a reference book of like a
Yeah.
religion, the language, the culture
It's
of
like,
this
what does it
world.
take to build a fantasy world, right? Like
Yeah.
you said, the language, the culture, the
Yeah,
world,
everything.
the surroundings. Yeah.
So, and it kind of makes me think it's like, okay, if you have something that's problematic, like a movie, because obviously even Hollywood is not that creative anymore. Like we're bringing
Everybody's
out the same
recycling the
films,
same thing.
recycling.
Yeah.
So it's like, how can we recycle but make it different? And I was like, if you, I know a lot of people are like, we can't recreate Gone with the Wind because it's so problematic, right? But what if you do redo it, but you subvert the genre, right? It's like,
Yeah.
show it for what it actually was.
Right.
Show the violence, the dangers, the actual truth of what it was to live in South
And antebellum
antebellum.
himself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in antebellum South, and show the actual terrors of that. And you can still use the book as that, but it's like what was actually happening? What happened? What was
Just make it
Scarlett
a little bit
Johansson's
more
woman?
historically
Yeah, more historically
accurate.
accurate. But again, it's a double-edged sword because it's like people nowadays want everything to be really historically accurate. Like there is no room for creativity sometimes, which
Right.
it is a double-edged sword because they're again with the Odyssey, even though it's not like historically proven, it's a
Right.
myth. It's a
Hmm.
mythology, right? So it's like
Yeah.
there is nuance to it. There is like some lore to that and some fantasy to it. But you have people complaining about like the accuracy, which I get it. Representation is important. Totally fine. Totally get that. But then it's like because people forget that, you know, you can't apply the morals or the political history that we have now to
Back to what
something,
was going on back then.
yeah, back then, right? Like,
No, it's very true. Because
yeah,
even when you talk about for like the commentary of people being like, oh, they should have casted more Greek people or whatever, you know? And it's just like, do y'all know, like, you guys realize that like the borders and like the way that like ethnicities are sort of made up right now are not
not the
necessarily the
same
way
how they
they
were
were
back then.
back
Yeah.
then. Yeah. Like, like ethnically speaking and phenotypically speaking, Greeks
It
were
was
looking a little
completely
bit
different.
different, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just like, you know, and it's like you said, it's like
They
you
were
can't
described
put
differently.
today's,
Yeah.
yeah, you can't put today's like idea of what it is, what a Greek was to like back then, because it's like,
Mhm.
first of all, we don't know if it happened.
Yeah.
Secondly, yeah, so yeah, it's fun.
And
It's
it's like,
interesting.
and that's why it's important to do your research when it comes to these movies because you would know the different ethnicities that they had and the way that they described color back then. Because even I know that
Exactly,
there's
because
been
even that
issues.
was different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because even now we have experience like the artist Tyla. She got a lot of flack for describing herself as a colored woman, but she's South African, and it's like the
that means something differently in South
it's
Africa.
so different over there. How and it's like I think people forget something sometimes, like you said, that the way we do things here in America is not the way other people do it, and the way that they describe race and identify themselves is not the same way that Americans do, right? Because we if the French did the way if the French identified themselves the way that we do here in America, they would be Black French people. They wouldn't just
Yeah,
be French, right? Here we have to identify ourselves as Mexican American. We can't just be American, right? Which
yeah,
we
because
should technically, right? But
right,
because
yeah, because
there's so much importance on race and where you're coming from that
yeah,
it's like, okay, whatever. So
I
I
mean,
know that
yeah,
that
and that's a
conversation with her has been big because people are like, oh, she doesn't want to identify as Black because she's colorist, right? But it's like, there's a little nuance there, you know,
yeah.
like you
And
can't.
there
Mhm.
really is something to be said about how the way that Black people who are not from America, the way they conceptualize their ideas of race and color and even like nationality and ethnicities is very different than the way that African Americans or Blacks in America like conceptualize those things because of our history with race and colorism in the US and our history of slavery versus what happened over there. And though in even like in Latin America, the way that like we also talk about like colorism and race in Mexico and in Latin America is different from the way that it's conceptualized here in the United States because of the histories that happened in the way that like, you know, that like took on. But so yeah, like you said, there's like nuance there.
Yeah, I think for me, that whole part kind of funny enough, like what's the book? And I know we've talked about this. My God, what is the book?
What is the book about?
Basically, it's about the author's experience of coming to America and how she's experienced racism and how she didn't see basically the differences of how they view Black Americans versus like actual Africans who come to this
Hmm.
country and live here, and like
Yeah.
the differences because in their eyes, they often have this like stereotype that I think is they have the stereotype, or Black Americans have the stereotype that they're lazy and that
Mm,
it's basically like an excuse, like all the hardships that they've experienced here in America. It's like you need
yeah.
to get up off your feet and like, do better for yourself. And there's this
Yeah.
idea
Like
that,
it's like that like the failing is on you,
yeah, exactly.
not on the
And
systemic.
so
Yeah.
some of them didn't necessarily believe that there was anything like systemic racism. And so I think at the time she had a boyfriend who was Black American, and like their perspective on race and their perspective on culture here and just America was different because obviously she was coming thinking with like the American dream, like we come here to better ourselves. We have so many opportunities. You guys are not taking advantage of it. You guys are so
Yeah.
privileged, right?
Hmm.
What Americana, that's the book.
Oh, yeah.
Americana. I remember I read it for my one of my upper grad classes, and when I read that, I was like, "Oh, that makes so much sense too." Because I never really, I'm like, obviously, we know that we don't have the perspective of what it's like to be a different race, right? We live in our own perspective of our own race, but having read that, even people that would be considered of the same race have completely different perspectives based off where they're coming from and how they see the
Hmm.
world, right? So that
Yeah.
like there's so much nuance there. So when this whole situation with Tyla happened, I was like, I know there's nuance because I've read a book
The
that
book.
talks about it. But I'm like,
Hmm.
not a lot of people see it that way because they do see it as an attack, or the way that they were raised. It's like, oh yeah, like if you say the word colored, it's an attack on someone. It's a
Well,
slur right
and
here
it's because of the
because of the
historical
history.
weight that
Yeah.
it has. Yeah.
But then it's like you forget you can't apply the history that America has to the history that Africa has. It's a completely different history, a completely set of different rules. And then
Especially if she was talking about from the perspective of how she refers to
how
herself.
she
It'd
identifies.
be it'd be different if she was like projecting that onto American, like her American fans and saying
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, you guys are colored." Like that would be different, and that's where it would be a learning experience for her too of like,
Yeah,
maybe
and it
I
definitely
don't do.
was. Yeah, and
Yeah.
she even said, she's like, "I understand where people were coming from, but like she said, it's like, but this is my culture." And even now, I know that there's been conversations amongst the Black community too, like, what would you consider people who are mixed, right? There's this whole conversation about that, and me, as obviously as a third party person with like, really have no say. I'm like, it is an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and what's craziest is that this was all just like socially constructed. It wasn't like it's like this way or that way. Like it was just that because the people that were in power and were trying to oppress people were the ones that said like this is how this goes and this is how it goes here in the United States versus how it was handled in other countries. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why there's so much push now to like just be like it's very black and white, right? Like people want that, and because they're tired. They're like, I'm so fucking tired of this conversation of like, what are
You
you?
can't you can't well, I mean you can't deny the diversity and dilute
Yeah.
it, but who knows? I know that everybody wants it to be a melting pot too, so
Yeah. Well, do you have any last thoughts?
um final thoughts. As always, we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode and it put things into perspective, especially when it comes to how you're consuming the media that you're consuming, how you're
Yeah.
reacting to it, and start like asking yourself or reflecting on why you're reacting to things in a certain way. And then, like I mentioned earlier, hopefully it'll spark some curiosity in you, and you'll want to like read into things a little bit more,
Mhm.
and maybe even like do your own little research on it, and you might be better for it afterwards. I could definitely encourage that, especially when you are dealing with controversial texts or pieces of media, because I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think it's going anywhere with our current situation. I don't think that things are going to get any less controversial, as much as people want to dilute things down to black or white and right and
Yeah.
wrong and stuff.
I agree. Yeah. I think obviously, as we mentioned, we can't run away from the nuance of life because that's life, that's reality. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to live in a fantasy world. I actually encourage that. I think it's important to dive into the creativity of stuff because, like we discussed, like there's a lot of influences to do creative work, right? And I think it is a way of escaping from the pains of our regular life, but we can't also be naive and ignore everything that's happening around us or turn a blind eye to things that make us uncomfortable because it does
Mhm.
make us uncomfortable, right?
Right.
Um, so like Shelley say, look within, be introspective, be curious, and ask good questions. Do it out of a place of curiosity,
Curiosity. Yeah.
not a place of judgment. And don't do it out of the want or desire to win. Again, it's more so we're having an open discussion
Open
to
dialogue.
understand because that's
Hmm.
the only way we're going to move forward because we need to find a common ground. And that's the only way we're going to be able to do that is
Yeah.
by being
Talking to
open-minded.
each other and not being at each other's throats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I hope you guys have a great week, weekend, day, evening, morning, sunshine.
All
We'll
of the
see you.
above.
Oh,
Hope you
by
guys
the
are having
way,
a great summer.
yeah, I was going to say next week there will not be an episode. We are going to be on a bye week because, as we mentioned, Shelly's going to be on vacation and I will be away for a work event. So we
Yes.
will not have
We're
time to
giving you
record, but we
we're
will
giving
see
you
you
guys a
guys,
break.
yeah, on the following week. So this is your time to catch up.
Yeah,
We've been,
catch up, watch movies that we've recommended, or like I said, use your curiosity and maybe go watch Gone with the Wind and take your own takes on it. I
yeah,
remember the first time I watched it. I watched it in bed with my mother, right? I think on a Thanksgiving weekend. It was the best.
yeah.
And it was a long ass movie. I didn't realize how long it was. And we were watching it on TV, so you could just imagine how much longer it was with commercial breaks. And you know what? I actually want to watch it again after the exercise we did because I was just like, I wonder what perspective I have on it.
Yeah, and funny enough, I think a lot of our episodes have a lot of intersectionality. We've been doing a really good job of like referencing and like putting little things together. So, yeah, this is your time to catch up and take notes and come prepared for the next episode, which will be a
Yeah,
fun
we're gonna
one.
have a text. We're gonna have a
Yeah.
test. I'm just kidding.
We're going to have an exam, so come prepared.
Yeah, come prepared to come back to Bishop University and see what else you might learn.
Have a good time. Bye. Have a good time. Have fun. Bye.